Hi everybody, this is Rebecca. I am super excited to be here to share a video with you today of 5 different ways to use cardstock strips. So you can use any kind of scraps you have laying around. I like to cut out strips with my 2 waffle flower stripes die. The left is the vertical stripes die and the right is the horizontal stripes die. And these fill an entire A2 card panel, so all the stripes put together make a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card panel. You can see the vertical stripes on the left there I cut out of brights, and then the horizontal stripes on the right there I cut out of pastels, but both rainbows because I love rainbows and we need lots of color and rainbows around here these days. So I do cut a bunch out, but you could use scraps like I'm showing you there. You don't have to cut the entire panel. You could just cut a scrap. Okay, so let's dive into the 5 different ways to use these strips. The first way is to cover a die cut shape. So I have cut out a large die cut heart using the waffle flower nesting hearts die, and I'm going to cover that entire die cut with tape runner. You could absolutely use liquid adhesive. I personally think tape runner is easiest for this technique. I'm going to do these diagonally. Since the strips cut vertical and horizontal, I think it's fun to play with a diagonal when you're covering up a shape. So I am just going to make sure that this diagonal covers the entire heart, and I am just laying down those strips. Once that's done, I'm just going to flip it over and I'm going to use some non-stick scissors and just cut off those little pieces that are hanging off the side there. It is kind of important to use non-stick scissors for this because you can see, especially on the purple strip there, there's a lot of adhesive that is kind of hanging off the edge there. So if you use a regular scissor that is not non-stick, it's definitely going to gum up your scissor. I love these Fisker scissors. They are non-stick. You can see I kind of have to peel off the strip because I used so much adhesive, but it doesn't get all gummed up there. So now I have my rainbow heart. I am just using my nail to kind of file down some rough edges there. You could use a nail file as well. Now I am going to use the Bold Sentiments stamp set and matching die from Waffle Flower. I'm going to use some anti-static on black cardstock and my Versamark ink to stamp this, and it is a happy birthday sentiment. I love the font. It's very playful and whimsical and kind of retro looking. I'm going to pour some white embossing powder on top of that, and then I'm going to grab out my heat tool and heat set it. And once that is done, I'm going to make sure it's cooled and is not going to smush or melt, and I'm going to cut it out with the matching die. I'm just going to use a little piece of Thermoweb's purple tape to hold it in place and run it through my Gemini machine. Now I am using Gina K foam squares. They are black because I am putting it behind this black cardstock here. I'm just going to use a bunch of those and peel off those back protective layers so that I can pop up my sentiment and you won't see that foam behind it because they are black as well. Once that's done, I am ready to throw this all on a card panel. So I am just going to use some tape runner and just add this to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding note card and call that good. So that is one way to use a rainbow of cardstock strips. The second way is to use them to create an abstract background. So I have a bunch of the horizontal strips, and I have the oversized Love word die cut out of glitter cardstock and adhered to the center of my card. So now I am adhering the ends of those strips in different lengths, and then once I have them adhered, I'm going to flip it over and cut off the excess again with that non-stick scissor. And I liked the way that looked, but I decided to go in and do the other side as well. So with the leftover pieces, I'm not cutting more strips. The leftover pieces, since I didn't use the whole strip on the right hand side, I'm now doing the same type of thing on the left hand side. And then just flip it over and cut off those excess, and you can see that I still have plenty more to use. So I thought, why not fill in some rectangles in those open spaces around the love die. So the love you word die. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not doing it in any order. I just kind of am filling in little bits and pieces here and there, trying to do at least one of each color. So I don't have them lined up. I don't have pink next to pink anywhere. And I just think that gives it that kind of modern abstract look. And then I am just cutting some little pieces to fit in between the swirls of the font there, because I did just want to fill those in and make sure that there was not too much white space going on there. So once that's done, I am going to use these as sub-sentiment areas, because the Oversized Love stamp set has a ton of really fun sub-sentiments. Everything from With All My Heart to The Moon and Back, Just the Way You Are, so much. So I am kind of laying them out on these strips, and now I'm going to use coordinating colors of ink to stamp the sentiment on the strip. So for the Gina K, I actually have the same color ink as cardstock, so that was real easy. For a couple of the colors though, I didn't have the coordinating inks, so I just grabbed a couple of Simon Says Stamp hybrid inks and stamped those. And I love the way that the ink looks tone on tone on the cardstock strip. It's just such a fun, different look. I haven't done a card like this ever before, I don't think. I mean, I did one where I did a rainbow of those sub-sentiments, but I did them in white, so I didn't do them on cardstock colors. So I think this is fun and different, and just another way to use up, again, those scraps or to use the strips. Now, I did kind of mess up a little bit. It was hard to get it close to the top and bottom, so I trimmed that with the scissors, and then I'm going to mount this on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of white cardstock, so that it just, I don't know, it just looked more finished to me that way. I also had a little boo-boo where I smeared some ink on one of the strips, and the nice thing is it's pretty easy to just stamp it again and re-adhere it and then just cut off the excess. So no biggie with a mistake there. Okay, so the next way is actually the way that these were intended to be used, behind other panel dies. So J.J. Bolton illustrates these dies for Waffle Flower, and on the left is the Big Dots die, and on the right is the Hearts panel die. So the Big Dots die can be used with both the vertical or the horizontal strips. I'm going to use them with the vertical strips. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere down to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white piece of cardstock, a whole bunch of tape runner, and then I'm going to lay down my strips and just cover up that whole card panel, because remember, the vertical stripes die creates a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel. So I am going to use a rainbow here and just cover up this entire card panel with a Roy G. Biv. So the entire rainbow fits right on the card panel. Now the Big Dots die is a little smaller than the card panel. You could just adhere it like that and have the excess kind of hanging out the side, or you can do what I'm going to do. I'm going to adhere it so that it shows 2 colors in each dot, and I'm going to let that dry with some liquid adhesive. I'm going to set that to the side, and we're going to trim off the excess later. Okay, for the Hearts panel die, I'm actually going to use the horizontal stripes. So what I'm going to do is adhere a little bit of liquid adhesive around the white cardstock of the Hearts panel die. Just put it in all those spaces except for the openings there. And then I'm going to lay my horizontal stripes die just from the back, covering up each line of hearts. Super, super simple, but wait until you flip it over. It just looks so adorable. So there are going to be more dies that are coming out that work with these stripes. Look at that. Super easy to create a rainbow of hearts. I love these dies in combination together, and this is how they were designed to intended to be. I had a couple of little strips that were hanging, so I'm going to cut those off on the hearts, and then for the big dots die, I am going to cut this whole panel down so that there's nothing, no color hanging out of the side, and then I'm going to adhere that to white cardstock so it looks like there's just a rainbow behind it. Okay, we will finish off that big dots die card in a minute, but first is the next way to use these strips, and it's for sentiment strips. Really easy, obvious, and simple, but you know, these are perfect strips for sub-sentiments. So I'm just going to stamp my sub-sentiment with all my heart on a piece of pink cardstock. This time I am using VersaFine Black Onyx ink, because if I'm using a black ink, I like to use VersaFine on top of color or pattern paper. It just shows up better, I think. And then I'm just going to use some dimensional adhesive to finish that off. Okay, and now to finish off the big dots die card, I'm just going to stamp a sentiment in the center there, and the big dots sentiment stamp set, all of those sentiments fit right in that little embossed rectangle in the center of the die cut there. So again, I am going to use some VersaFine Black Onyx ink and stamp that up, and I'm going to actually double stamp it because it just didn't come out super, super dark and crisp. That's what the MISTI is for, right? So that is two ways to use the vertical or a horizontal stripes die behind other panel dies. The last way to use these strips is to create a woven background. So what I have here are several of the horizontal strips in colors, and then I have some vertical strips in white cardstock. And what I'm going to do is create like a weave. So the first color is going to go on top of the white strip. The second color is going to go underneath, and I'm going to put just a little bit of space in between the two, just so that it kind of looks like it's actually woven. And basically what I did there was put a bunch of tape runner behind the white strip, and it's okay if I lay it down on my work surface because I am working on the Waffle Flower Water Media Mat, which is non-stick. So adhesive, if it gets on there, it just rubs right off. It's just a great work surface for this kind of thing, and it doesn't stick to your project. You can just peel it right off. So I am just going to continue going, you know, over and then under until I complete an entire rainbow there strip. So I just missed a little bit of adhesive at the bottom of the vertical white strip, so I had to go in and add some more. And now it's a little bit easier because now you can kind of just place the strip over, under, and it doesn't have to really be all glued in until we flip it over and then adhere everything down. So once you get that first strip done, the rest of it is piece of cake, and then you can actually kind of slide things around a little bit if you want them a little closer, if you want the weave tighter or looser, just depends on what kind of look you're going for there. So I think that that is enough. I am going to adhere down those horizontal strips because they were kind of sticking up a little bit, and I decided to do that and then trim everything down a little bit so that all the edges were even. So that's what I'm doing in my Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer here, just trimming everything down. And now I can place it on top of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of white cardstock. And when I do that, I'm actually going to pop it up on a little bit of foam adhesive. I really like the way this looks. It's tons of texture and layers of dimension, and the foam adhesive, I thought it really was kind of cool, just brought everything together. So I'm going to peel off those back protective layers here, and as long as you put the strips along the white cardstock, you won't see them from the front. So there we go. I'm going to put that down on my card panel there. And then it is time to create a sentiment. This time I'm using the oversized hello word die from Waffle Flower, and I'm going to stack this. So I am putting some liquid adhesive down behind a white cardstock hello, and then I am putting some liquid adhesive behind some glitter cardstock, gold glitter, and then I'm just going to place that right on top of the one that was already down on the card, just to add a little extra dimension for that hello there. Now I'm going to stamp You're on My Mind. Now, there's different levels of that cardstock, so I'm doing it in my MISTI so I can do it multiple times in case I don't get a great impression. So you see there, I kind of missed the R and the E, so I just had to close the door and restamp it. And that's a fifth way to use these cardstock strips. So whether you are using them as sentiment strips, covering a die cut, whether you're weaving them or creating an abstract background, there are lots of ways to use up your scraps and use the vertical stripes or horizontal stripes die from Waffle Flower. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I used today, they will all be linked down below. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel here, check out my blog for more information, and I'll have a couple of other videos that you might be interested in. I want to thank you so much for stopping by today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.